She took my $18,000, told me I wasn't invited, then smirked like I'd still pay anyway. Now, let me tell you about the exact moment I realized I wasn't welcome, not just at a party, but in my own sister's life. My name's Rebecca Wilson. I'm 32 years old, and I've been an architect in Boston for nearly a decade. I work hard, I do well for myself, and I've always been the kind of person who quietly takes care of things for the people I love. That includes my younger sister, Kimberly. She's 27, charming in that shiny, Instagrammable way, with a fiancé named Nathan who has a trust fund, a family yacht, and zero clue how to clean a sink. When Kim got engaged last year, she called me first. She was sobbing happy tears, telling me how she couldn't believe it was finally happening, and how she wanted everything to be perfect. She said she didn't want a bridal shower or a bachelorette weekend, just one beautiful engagement party to celebrate with close friends and family. She said it wouldn't mean anything unless I helped plan it. I should have known. Fast forward to me sitting with a Google sheet, vetting Boston venues and caterers on my lunch breaks, all while still managing 3 major projects at my firm. I didn't complain. I even offered to cover the catering deposit because she wasn't sure when Nathan's parents were wiring the money. That deposit turned into me footing the entire catering bill, floral arrangements, custom invitations, and even the damn valet service. All told, I dropped just over 18 grand. $18,000. I could have taken a luxury vacation or put a solid chunk down on a condo, but no. I spent it on a one-night event for my little sister because I thought I was doing something meaningful. 2 weeks before the party, I was invited over to my parents' house for what I assumed was a family dinner. When I walked in, it wasn't just family. Nathan's parents were there, along with his sister and some other relatives I hadn't met. It felt formal, like a pre-rehearsal dinner, but no one told me to dress up. I was in jeans. Everyone else looked like they were waiting for cocktails to be served. Kim greeted me with a hug that felt robotic. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I noticed she wasn't wearing the charm bracelet I got her for her birthday a few months earlier, the one she cried over because it had a tiny drafting compass on it, a nod to my work. Whatever. We sat, we ate, and things felt off the whole time. Nobody mentioned the engagement party even once, which was weird because it was less than a week away. At some point, Nathan's mom asked Kim if she was nervous about the guest list. Kim just laughed and said, "No, we've trimmed it down to the essentials." That stung a bit, but I let it go. Then, right before dessert, Kim casually says, "Oh, by the way, Becky, don't worry about next Saturday. You don't need to come to the party." I blinked. At first I thought she was joking. I mean, I paid for it. Coordinated every damn detail. My response was something like, "Sorry, what?" She smiled, that smug tight-lipped kind of smile she used to give me in high school when she borrowed my clothes without asking. "It's just, we're keeping it really intimate." And Nathan's parents thought it might be too chaotic with too many people. You know how you are with crowds. I stared at her like she'd just slapped me. I laughed a little, because what else was I supposed to do? "You mean the party I paid for?" Nathan's mom chimed in then, all syrupy and fake, saying, "Of course, we appreciate all your help. You've done so much. It's just going to be a lot of people from Nathan's side, and we thought it might be awkward." I turned to Kim, waiting for her to say something. Anything. She just sipped her wine and shrugged. "I funded this entire thing," I said, louder than I intended. "And you're uninviting me?" She didn't even blink. "I didn't uninvite you. I'm just saying you don't need to come. You've done your part." That's when I realized this wasn't about the guest list. This wasn't about logistics or catering counts. This was about making a statement. I stood up. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed calm. I looked at my parents, who suddenly found something interesting on their plates. I looked at Nathan, who had the decency to look mildly uncomfortable. And I looked at Kim, my baby sister, the one I used to sneak peanut butter cups to when she had nightmares as a kid. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. I said, "All right, if that's how it is." I walked out. I didn't say another word. Drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The next day, I called the caterer and the florist. Told them to send the final invoices to Kimberly Wilson. I didn't say why. Didn't argue. Just said the payments would no longer be coming from my account. I don't know what she did after that. I don't care. That party might have cost me $18,000, but in a way, it saved me a lot more. It showed me exactly where I stood. The thing people never understand about sacrifice is that it doesn't come in one big, dramatic gesture. It's not some Hallmark movie moment where you choose love over a career and everything works out perfectly. No, it's slower, quieter, and it wears you down over time until one day you look up and realize your entire adult life has been shaped around the choices you made for someone else. I was 19 when our mom died. Stage for breast cancer. She fought like hell, but the last 6 months were brutal. Kimberly was barely 14, still in middle school, and completely wrecked by it. I remember holding her in the hallway outside Mom's room the night she passed, her little face buried in my hoodie, soaking it with tears. She kept asking if we could sleep in Mom's bed that night. I said yes, and we did. That was the first night I truly understood what it meant to be responsible for another person. I had gotten into 3 schools, one in New York, one in Chicago, and one in-state that was offering a partial scholarship for architecture. My plan was to go out of state, do the dorm thing, build a new life like everyone else my age. But after Mom died, that changed instantly. I didn't even hesitate. I deferred enrollment and picked up a part-time job at a bookstore down the street from our house, then another one doing night shifts at a 24-hour diner on the weekends. My entire life pivoted toward one goal, making sure Kimberly didn't fall apart. Our dad, Thomas, wasn't really there after Mom died. Not physically. He still lived in the house. But emotionally, he was somewhere else entirely. He stopped eating dinner with us. Stopped asking about school. Spent hours in the garage working on some old motorcycle he never actually fixed. Sometimes I'd come home from work and find Kimberly on the couch watching TV alone, still in her school clothes, with no sign of him anywhere. I started making dinner every night, helping with homework, buying groceries with my tips. It didn't feel like a burden back then. It felt like what needed to be done. She was my sister, but for a long time, she was also my kid. When Dad met Diane, I wanted to be happy for him. I really did. I thought maybe having someone in his life would pull him back into ours. At first, Diane seemed nice enough, overly polished, always smiling like she was trying out for a toothpaste commercial, but whatever. Dad was shaving again. That felt like progress. But it didn't take long to realize that Diane didn't like me. I couldn't tell you why. Maybe because I was too independent. Maybe because I reminded her that Dad had a life before her. Or maybe she just didn't like having a young woman in the house who didn't need her approval. Whatever the reason, she made it clear in 100 tiny ways. Cold smiles. Passive-aggressive comments. Excluding me from conversations at dinner, like I was just some temporary guest. She adored Kimberly, though. From day one. Bought her new clothes. Took her out for Monty Python. Got her a new iPhone just because she said her old one was glitchy. Kimberly ate it up. I mean, she was a teenager, still grieving, still figuring out who she was. And suddenly here's this glamorous woman treating her like a princess. Of course she fell for it. The part that hurt the most wasn't the gifts or the attention. It was how Diane started drawing these subtle lines between us, like I was just the older sister who meant well, but was too serious or too opinionated. If I got a good review at work or mentioned that I was taking night classes again to finish my degree, Diane would smile politely and change the subject. But when Kimberly got a B+ on her history quiz, it was a celebration. Streamers, cake, the whole 9 yards. And Kimberly started to change, too. Not overnight, but slowly. She started coming to me less, talking to Diane more. I'd overhear them whispering in the kitchen, laughing in that hushed way people do when they know someone else is listening. It stung. I'd spent 5 years rearranging my entire life to keep her afloat, and now I was the outsider in my own home. One time, I'll never forget this. I came home early from class and found Diane in the living room showing Kimberly some old photo albums. Pictures of me and Kim when we were little. At first I thought it was sweet, but then I heard Diane say, "You've always been the special one, Kim." Everyone could see it, even back then. Your mom used to say you had star power, which was weird, because Mom never talked like that. She loved us both, but she wasn't the kind of person to pick favorites. Still, I didn't say anything. I just walked upstairs and sat in my room in the dark for an hour, trying not to cry. It was like watching the bond I'd spent years building with my sister unravel in slow motion, thread by thread. And the worst part was, there was nothing I could do about it. Because the more I tried to pull her back toward me, the more it looked like I was jealous, or bitter, or just couldn't handle someone else stepping in. That's what Diane wanted it to look like, anyway. So I stopped trying. Not completely, but enough to protect myself. I still helped when I could. Still showed up for her school events. Still helped with college applications when she asked. But I let Diane take center stage. I let her be the new mother figure, even when it made me sick to my stomach. Because at the end of the day, Kimberly needed someone, and if she chose Diane over me, I wasn't going to punish her for it. I just hoped, naively, that she'd remember who had been there when it really mattered. When it was just the two of us in that empty house, eating boxed mac and cheese on the floor because I couldn't afford a new table after ours broke. When I stayed up all night sewing sequins onto her dance recital costume because she forgot to tell me the original got ruined. When I gave up everything I thought my life would be, just so hers wouldn't fall apart. But I guess memories like that don't shine as bright as gifts wrapped in ribbon. It didn't happen all at once. Like most things in our relationship, the pattern started quietly, in small, almost invisible increments. A phone call here, a favor there, a little money to cover textbooks, then rent, then tuition, then, Somehow, her entire life. When Kimberly got into college, I was genuinely proud of her. I remember the exact moment she opened the acceptance email. She shrieked like she'd won the lottery and jumped into my arms. For a minute, it felt like we were kids again, just us against the world. I promised her I'd help however I could. She cried and told me I was the best sister in the world. I believed her. She chose a private liberal arts school out of state. Expensive, yes, but she swore she'd get scholarships, part-time jobs, whatever it took. That lasted one semester. She got overwhelmed fast. Called me in tears one night about a failed math quiz and a roommate who left raw chicken in the microwave. I drove 5 hours that weekend with grocery bags, cleaning supplies, and a Visa gift card I couldn't really afford to give. After that, it never really stopped. Every semester brought some new emergency. First, it was a bursar hold because her student loan paperwork hadn't gone through. Then her roommate bailed, and she needed help covering the lease. Then her laptop died. Then her credit card bill got out of control. And every time, it was the same script: frantic text messages, long breathless phone calls, sobbing voicemails at midnight. I paid. Every time. Tuition, rent, groceries, credit cards, even gas money some months. I told myself it was temporary, that once she graduated, things would even out. That's what everyone said, right? Invest now, it'll pay off later. But Kimberly wasn't investing. She was withdrawing. From me. From our relationship. At first, it was little things, like forgetting to call me on my birthday or canceling our coffee dates last minute. But soon she was missing holidays. Showing up to family events only if Nathan was available to pick her up. I'd find out about her big internship in New York from Instagram. I'd hear about her study abroad plans from Diane in passing, usually after the fact, when it was already too late to be included. Yet she always remembered me when she needed something. Once, she called me sobbing about an overdraft fee because she forgot her rent was auto-deducted the same day she bought concert tickets. Another time, she broke down because Nathan's parents made a comment about her not having savings. I sent $500 without hesitation. No questions. Just, it's done. You're okay now. She'd thank me in that breathy, rushed voice she always used when she was guilty. Say something like, "I don't know what I'd do without you," and then disappear for 3 weeks. Sometimes I wouldn't even get a text back until she needed help with a resume or wanted me to look over an apartment lease. The imbalance was obvious. Everyone else saw it. My friends would raise their eyebrows when I told them I was covering her last semester's tuition so she could focus on her thesis. My accountant straight up asked if I had any plans to adopt her legally, since she was technically a dependent. It was meant as a joke, but I didn't laugh. I'd lie in bed at night wondering how it got this far. I wasn't angry, not exactly. Just tired. So bone-deep exhausted from constantly giving to someone who saw me less as a sister and more as a safety net. But then I'd remember her at 14, curled up in my lap on the floor of our shared room, whispering that she couldn't sleep without Mom's voice. I'd remember that night I sat in the waiting room while she got stitches from a bike crash, and how she wouldn't let go of my hand even when the nurse told her I had to wait outside. I'd remember the note she left me on my nightstand before her high school graduation, just a post-it with "You saved me" scribbled in pink ink. I held on to those memories like they were life jackets. Because if I didn't, I'd drown in the reality that the girl I once carried through grief and chaos had become a woman who only reached for me when her own world started sinking. And I let her. Again and again. Because I couldn't shake the feeling that if I stopped showing up, she might vanish completely. When Kimberly told me she was engaged, I almost believed for a second that things might finally change between us. She called late one Sunday, breathless and giggling. Her voice that syrupy, kind of happy that always made me think of Christmas morning. "Tyler proposed," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "It was so perfect, Beck. You would have cried." Tyler Bradley. The name alone told you everything you needed to know. His family owns half of the commercial blocks in Back Bay and a handful of luxury condo towers that scrape the Boston skyline. They're the kind of people who donate wings to hospitals and name foundations after themselves. I'd met Tyler twice before. The kind of man who calls his mother by her first name and never makes eye contact with the waitstaff. Still, I smiled through the call. I congratulated her, told her I was happy for her. I even laughed when she sent a blurry photo of the ring and insisted it looked better in natural light. A 4-carat emerald-cut diamond doesn't need sunlight, but whatever. For a moment, I let myself think this could be a turning point. Maybe planning a wedding would bring us back together, give us something to hold on to. A few days later, she called again. Not with excitement this time, panic. The Hamilton estate had an open date in August, the only one left for the next 15 months, but it required an $$18,000 deposit to lock it in. Tyler's parents were on a Mediterranean cruise and unreachable. Diane was apparently handling other wedding logistics, whatever that meant. And Kimberly, of course, had no savings. I remember the silence on the line after she laid it all out. She didn't ask, not directly. Just sat there breathing heavily, waiting. I asked if she was sure it had to be now. She said, "I've always dreamed of this place. Mom used to take us to that park across the street and say someday one of us would get married there." Which I don't even remember, but I let it go. So I offered. I said I'd cover the deposit, and she cried. Actual, real tears. Said I was saving her. Said no one else would understand what this meant. And I didn't just pay it. I wired the money that same day, no hesitation. I told myself it was a gesture of love, not obligation. I told myself it would mean something. That this would be the moment we reset. That when she looked back on her engagement, she'd think of me. I never expected anything back. I just wanted to be included. To feel like I was part of the joy. But the moment the money cleared, I was cut out. No group chats. No planning updates. No tasting invitations or dress shopping texts. I'd hear things in passing. From our aunt, from Diane, sometimes from Instagram stories I wasn't tagged in. The kind of cold shoulder you don't notice right away, not until it's gone on too long to be accidental. I called her once, just to check in, to ask if there was anything else she needed help with. She said everything was handled. Said I'd done more than enough. Then changed the subject to how stressful flower arrangements were. I stayed on the line listening to her complain about peonies versus hydrangeas like I wasn't the reason the whole thing was even possible. The distance grew fast. I'd bring up the party around our dad, and he'd awkwardly mumble something about how Diane and the Bradleys were coordinating everything now. When I asked Kimberly if I could come early to help set up, she just said, "I think it's all covered," like I was offering to bring napkins to a banquet. I watched it happen in slow motion. A door gently, politely closed in my face. And I still hoped. God help me. I hoped that maybe she was just overwhelmed. That maybe once the dust settled, she'd loop me back in. That she'd acknowledge, even quietly, that I mattered. That I wasn't just the wallet behind the scenes. But the truth settled in eventually. I wasn't her sister anymore. I was a service provider she no longer needed. I wasn't even supposed to find out. That's the part that still gets me. If my cousin Elena hadn't called, I probably would have shown up to the Hamilton estate thinking I had a seat at the table I paid for. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was leaving work, juggling a coffee and a rolled-up site plan, when my phone buzzed. Elena's voice was chipper at first, asking what I was wearing to the party, if I was coming early for photos. When I told her I hadn't heard anything about the schedule or even seating, there was a long pause. You're not on the list." I laughed. I thought she was kidding. Of course I was on the list. I was the one who'd sent the $18,000 deposit. I made the whole thing possible. But Elena sounded confused, then uncomfortable. "It's just, I was helping Kimberly's planner finalize the layout. You're not at the family table. Or any table. Your name wasn't on anything." I remember standing on the sidewalk outside my office, surrounded by traffic and the late summer heat, and feeling like someone had poured cold water down my back. I told her it was probably a mistake. Maybe just a clerical thing. She didn't say anything. Just mumbled something about needing to run and hung up. That night, I drove to Kimberly's apartment. I didn't text ahead. I didn't want to give her time to rehearse. I stood outside her brownstone with my hand on the buzzer for a full minute before pressing it. She answered. No hug. No smile. Just opened the door like she was bracing for a weather report. We sat in her living room, both of us on edge. I didn't even pretend. I just asked her straight out. "Am I invited to the party?" She looked at me for a second, really looked at me, and then said, without blinking, "We all agreed. You're not. Not, it's complicated, or there was a miscommunication. Just flat, deliberate rejection." I felt the air leave my lungs. I asked who we was. She didn't answer directly, but I could guess. Diane, Tyler, his parents. People who had money and status and a deep aversion to anything they couldn't control. I asked her why. And that's when Diane emerged from the kitchen, like she'd been waiting for her cue. "Rebecca, we're concerned," she said, sitting across from me like she was about to deliver a performance review. "You've been emotional. Unpredictable. Kimberly needs a calm, supportive environment right now. This day is about her future." I stared at her, too stunned to speak. Kimberly didn't say a word. Just sat there letting Diane do all the talking. Tyler's mother chimed in next. Apparently, she was visiting from New York and had opinions to share. She said something about how events like this required balance and how I hadn't always demonstrated the right energy. I asked her what that meant. She waved her hand vaguely, like swatting at a fly. I turned to Kimberly. "You really don't want me there?" She shifted in her seat, eyes glued to the carpet. "It's not that I don't want you. It's just, things got complicated. And Tyler's family has expectations. So I'm a problem?" I asked. "An inconvenience?" Diane jumped in again. "Rebecca, no one is accusing you. But you have a history of emotional moments. We all remember Christmas and the 4th of July. Apparently showing up alone to family functions after your sister ignores your texts is now considered an emotional outburst. That was the moment it all snapped into focus. The money, the silence, the sudden distance. I hadn't been included because they never planned to include me. They just wanted what I could give. And once they had it, I was a liability. Something to manage. Something to keep out of view. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but I didn't let them see that. I didn't say anything dramatic. Just picked up my purse and walked out. Kimberly didn't follow me. She didn't call after me. She didn't say thank you or I'm sorry or anything at all. The door closed behind me like punctuation. Final. Cold. And that's how I ended up outside on the sidewalk again. Under the same streetlight where I once stood the night, she called me crying about a broken lease. Except this time, there was no favor to give. Just silence. And the slow, painful realization that I'd been cut out of something I built with my own hands. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. It was like something finally clicked into place. All those years of bending over backwards, of throwing money at the idea of family, of believing that love would eventually be enough, it all stopped mattering. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table I paid for. I was going to take it back. I called Hannah, a friend from college who went into contract law. We hadn't spoken in a while, but she picked up right away. I told her everything. The deposit, the exclusion, the confrontation. She listened without interrupting and then said, "Rebecca, if your name is on the payment and there's no signed contract assigning it to someone else, then you have every right to cancel and request reimbursement, especially if they're excluding you from the event." I had never felt more seen. She told me exactly what I needed to do, what documentation to gather, how to phrase the communication, what statutes applied. I spent the rest of the day combing through emails, Venmo receipts, even old text threads where Kimberly had written things like, "I can't believe you're saving us," and "I owe you forever." I printed everything, highlighted the dates, organized it into a neat little folder with my name on the front. Then I made an appointment with the event coordinator at Hamilton Estate. I didn't call Kimberly. I didn't tell anyone. I just walked in, handed the woman the folder, and calmly explained that I was the sole payer of the deposit and had not been included in the event in any way. I told her I had no intention of making a scene, but I was requesting that the funds be refunded or, at the very least, credited back to my account per the estate's cancellation policy. She looked at the folder for a long time. Then she asked me one question. "You were never invited to the event?" I said no. Not only was I not invited, I was deliberately excluded after funding the deposit. Her face shifted. Not surprised exactly, just disappointed. She told me she'd speak with the estate's legal team, but based on the documentation and the payment trail, she was confident they could cancel the reservation and issue a refund minus administrative fees. Almost the full amount. 2 days later, it hit my account. $17,400. The email confirmation hit my inbox with the subject line, "Event cancellation processed." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen, heart pounding, feeling something deeper than anger, deeper than grief. I felt done, like the final thread had been cut, and I was finally allowed to float free. I packed a small bag and checked into a hotel across the river. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place with blackout curtains and thick walls. I turned off my phone. Not just silent. Off. Cold. Gone. I wasn't interested in the storm I knew was coming, because I knew what would happen next. The texts, the voicemails, the accusations, the scrambling. Kimberly would say I ruined her big day. Diane would talk about emotional sabotage. Tyler's parents would probably threaten legal action, despite never putting a dollar toward the event themselves. But none of that was mine anymore. The wedding wasn't mine. The drama wasn't mine. The family expectations weren't mine. All that remained was a number in my bank account, a folder of receipts, and the realization that I didn't need to buy my place in anyone's life ever again. When I finally turned my phone back on, the screen lit up like it was trying to catch fire. 58 missed calls, over 100 unread texts, voicemails, Instagram DMs, even an email from Kimberly's wedding planner marked urgent, response required. The first voicemail was from Diane. Her voice was tight, clipped, the kind of tone someone uses when they think they're being professional but are seconds away from screaming. She said I had caused irreparable emotional harm to Kimberly and disrupted a sacred family milestone. I deleted it halfway through. The next message was Kimberly sobbing, asking how I could do this to her, saying she never thought I'd be so cruel, then dissolving into static and tears. They got angrier after that. Tyler's father left a message where he called me vindictive, accused me of extortion, and said their family was reevaluating the entire marriage arrangement. That last part made me laugh out loud. I hadn't ruined the engagement. I just pulled back the curtain, and apparently, what they saw scared them more than I ever could. I didn't answer a single call. I didn't respond to any texts. But I did write one email. I sat at the desk in the hotel room, opened my laptop, and typed out a detailed message addressed to everyone involved. My father, Diane, Kimberly, Tyler, his parents, and a handful of extended family who had started chiming in via group texts. The subject line was simple: clarification. I kept it calm, precise. I laid out the timeline, how I was asked for the deposit, how I sent the money, how I was excluded from planning, how I discovered I wasn't even invited to the party. I attached screenshots of my bank transfer, the texts where Kimberly thanked me for saving the day, and the invoice in my name from Hamilton Estate. I added a few more screenshots of Diane talking down to me in group chats, dismissing my concerns, and telling Kimberly we don't need her energy on the day of. I ended the email with a single paragraph. I have spent the last decade giving to this family in every way I knew how, financially, emotionally, physically. I've covered tuition, rent, therapy bills, credit cards. I've shown up when no one else did. And the moment I said no, no to being excluded, no to being used, I was called unstable, selfish, and dramatic. If that's the narrative you choose to believe, that's your right. But I'm done participating in it. These are the facts. Do what you will with them. I hit send and closed the laptop. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. No one responded for hours. Not even Kimberly. But I could feel it shifting, the panic, the scrambling. I knew they were reading every word, rereading it, forwarding it to others, trying to figure out how to spin it. It was my cousin Elena who finally broke the silence. She replied to the whole thread with a single sentence. Honestly, I'm glad someone finally said it. After that, it spread like wildfire. Other cousins started texting me, apologizing for not realizing how much I'd been doing behind the scenes. One of my aunts called to say she'd had her suspicions about Diane for years, but didn't want to get involved. Even my dad sent a message, just one line, no punctuation. I didn't know. I'm sorry. It didn't fix everything. It didn't make up for the years I spent erasing myself for the sake of their comfort. But it exposed something that had been festering for a long time. And once the truth was out there, none of them could shove it back in the box. Not even Diane. Especially not Diane. The wedding didn't get canceled, but it was postponed. The Hamilton estate was booked through next summer anyway, and without a deposit, they'd have to start from scratch. I heard through a mutual friend that Tyler's family was reconsidering the optics of the whole situation. As for me, I didn't reply to any of the fallout. Not the apologies, not the excuses, not the desperate attempts to reframe the story. I'd already said what needed to be said. And for the first time in years, I didn't owe anyone anything. It was late afternoon when my dad showed up at the hotel. I didn't expect it. I hadn't heard from him since I sent the email. I figured he was keeping his distance out of loyalty to Diane, or maybe just because that was easier than facing what he'd let happen. But there he was, standing in the lobby, holding a paper bag from the coffee shop across the street like it was a peace offering. He looked older than I remembered, more tired, less polished. We sat in the corner booth of the hotel lounge. He didn't waste time with small talk. I've been a coward, he said quietly. And I let her turn you into the villain because it was convenient. Because it meant I didn't have to look too closely at what I was letting happen under my own roof. I didn't say anything. I let him talk. He told me he remembered the night Mom died. The way I took over without asking. The way I made sure Kimberly got to school every morning, every appointment, every dance class. He said he saw it all, and then looked away from it for years. It was easier to believe Diane's version of you, he said. Selfish, cold, difficult, but it was never true. You just stopped letting yourself be used. I think that was the first time I saw guilt on his face. Real, raw guilt. I can't undo what I let happen, he said. But I can stop pretending I didn't let it. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But when he left, I didn't feel empty. Just lighter. Of course, that peace didn't last long. 2 days later, Kimberly and Diane showed up at the hotel. No warning. Just a knock on my door and their voices in the hallway. They didn't come to apologize. Not really. Diane opened with something about clearing the air, but it was just another attempt to paint themselves as victims. Kimberly looked hollow. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes were red. You could have just said you were hurt, she said. You didn't have to blow everything up. I told them the only thing I ever blew up was the fantasy that I didn't matter. I said I wasn't going to apologize for choosing myself after a decade of being the designated savior. Diane started to say something, but I cut her off. I'm not interested in reconciling with people who think my worth is tied to my silence, I said. Kimberly cried. Diane looked like she was going to explode. And I just stood there, calm for the first time in years. When they left, I sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled. I had no idea what came next. But for once, I wasn't scared of the unknown. The months that followed weren't perfect. Healing never is. I started therapy and actually stuck with it. I stopped apologizing in every email. I took a solo trip to Lisbon, walked along the water every morning, ate alone without headphones, listened to myself think. It was the first time I realized I liked being alone. I wasn't lonely, just free. Somewhere in all that, I reconnected with David, an old college friend who'd always had a quiet, steady way of showing up. We started meeting for coffee, then dinner. Nothing dramatic. No whirlwind. Just kindness. A softness I hadn't realized I missed. It wasn't about saving or fixing. It was about being seen. My dad calls now. Not out of guilt, but because he wants to know me again. We're both cautious, but we're trying. I don't think he fully understands everything he allowed, but he stopped denying it. And that matters. As for Kimberly, I haven't heard from her since that day at the hotel. I don't know if the wedding happened. I don't check. I don't scroll through her posts like I used to. I don't track her life anymore like it's something I'm supposed to clean up. Because I finally understand that walking away from a family that hurts you isn't cruel. It's survival. It's how you start over without dragging the weight of their expectations behind you. I live differently now. I say no. I rest without guilt. I spend money on myself without justifying it. And every time I feel that familiar pull, that little voice that says maybe they were right, I remind myself of who I was in their story and who I've become outside of it. Thanks for sticking with me through all of this.